Good evening, everybody, and a big welcome to another Kahani Cheti by wishing everybody to have with us two very eminent people, and this is really the Shubho part of the Navabarsho with which we are starting off in Kahani Kancheti. And Kahani Kancheti, those of you who regularly attend our shows and those who are here for the first time, it is a digital platform where we discuss anything in the broad spectrum of art and culture, which would mean anything to do with books, poetry, cinema, theater, and everything is turned into an Adda format. Therefore, we call all our sessions Kahani Addas. We would like you to visit our website once in a while, and subsequently, I'll give you the link to our website. And Archana here is already saying that you're very excited for the live chat. Yes, and even I'm very excited about the live chat, because what we are going to discuss today is a book called History of Sriniketan. Now, while we will discuss the book and the author and the gentleman who will be in conversation with the author, I must first tell you that despite claiming myself to be a part of the middle-class Bengali intelligentsia, I had very little knowledge about Sriniketan. Now, let me tell you, most of us have very little knowledge of Sriniketan, though it is only 3 kilometers away from Shantiniketan. So for us, it has been Purvopolli, Chatintala, Uditi, Shamoli, and Khowai, and that's it. But very rarely have we moved on to the other side of the border. So therefore, when I read this book, it was mind-blowing. Now, before I invite my guests and we start the conversation, I'd like to also introduce you. No, well, not introduce. They have been here for a long time. The publishers of this book, Niyogi Books. Now, Niyogi Books have been set up in 2004, and it's an internationally reputed publishing house with, I think, right now about 500 titles. Most of them, almost all of them, their focus has been on illustrated books on art and architecture, religion, spirituality, biographies, memoirs. And I will say this, that their coffee table books are absolutely excellent, immaculate. And even the subjects. And their subjects have been from anything from Field Marshal Cariappas to Saurav Ganguly to Amir Khan and Muslim architecture, the works. So Niyogi Books have published this book for Dr. Uma Das Gupta, and we will now go on straight to, I will invite Dr. Das Gupta to come on the show. And here is Dr. Uma Das Gupta. Umadi, namaskar. And before I now would like to, now this is the difficult task which I was telling both of them before we came online. Is a very difficult task for me. I have never had such eminence in my show. Dr. Uma Das Gupta is a DPhil from Oxford. She is known as a Tagore historian and a Tagore biographer. She has studied in Presidency College, and she was just now telling me that she did 60-62 BA and 63-64 Masters. So I was very much in some, well, junior to middle school at that point of time. All right, so there we go. And then she has also studied at University of Oxford and has taught at Jadavpur University and Visva Bharati and the Indian Statistical Institute, from where she retired in 2004 as Professor of Social Sciences Division. Now, she was the head of the United States Education Foundation in India for the Eastern region between 1984 and 1999, and has had visiting fellowships at the University of Oxford in UK and at Columbia University. During 2005 to 2008, she was editorial fellow, Center for the Studies of Civilization of Government of India, for the project of History of Indian Science, Philosophy and Culture. Now, during 2012 and 14, she was invited to a national fellowship of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies in Shimla. And during 2014 to 2018, she was a member of the Indian delegacy for Oxford University Press in UK. Now, her publications are long. She has edited letters called A Difficult Friendship between Edward Thompson and Tagore. Uh, she has done a biography on Tagore. They are different. One is a biography, the other is My Life in My Words. And she has also done a book on Rabindranath in Bengali, published by Anando. And of course, the Oxford India Tagore, selected writings on education and nationalism. And she has edited Rabindranath Tagore, An Illustrated Life for the Oxford University. She has also done friendships between Andrew Tagore and Gandhi. Now, that's a very, very interesting book, which I like to lay my hands on. And now we have this book, which I was just showing you, History of Sriniketan, Tagore's work on rural reconstruction. I have been blown out of my head by learning Tagore's views and philosophy. So I would suggest that to all. So Umadi, there you are. And now we have Professor Sushanta Dattagupta. Once again, the task is difficult, but here we go.
She is Uma Das Gupta. I'm Sushanta Dattagupta.
Yeah, sorry, Sushanta Dattagupta. But that's what I'm saying. Did I say something else? No.
You said Das Gupta because you're overwhelmed by Das Gupta, I think.
Well, one Barinjo with both these, I may be going off. Okay. Now, coming to Professor Sushanta Dattagupta, I got it right this time. Well, he has been teaching at Presidency College. He started by teaching in Presidency College in Kolkata in 1968. And then in 1969, he went over to the US to join the Brookhaven National Laboratory, St. John's University, where he did his doctoral research to obtain a PhD in physics. In 73, he continued in the US for 3 more years to work as a postdoctoral fellow at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and later at the University of Alberta for a year. Well, in 1976, he returned to India and joined the Material Science Laboratory at Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research at Kalpakam, part of the Atomic Research Center. And then he moved on, he worked there till 81, and he moved on to Hyderabad as the leader of the School of Physics at University of Hyderabad, which he did till 86. And then he moved down to Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. So from Chennai to Hyderabad to Delhi. And in JNU, he taught till 1999, first as professor and later as the Dean of School of Physical Sciences. He then went back to Calcutta in 1999 as director of S.N. Bose National Center for Basic Sciences, and then directorship of the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research at Kolkata. And in 2011, Professor Dattagupta was appointed as Vice Chancellor of Visva Bharati University. He has also been Vice President of the Indian Academy of Sciences in Bangalore during 2004 to 2009, and a council member of the National Academy of Sciences at Allahabad between 2001 and 2007. Among his other books on science, which I am not listing out, but the 2 important books that I think I should talk to you about is that among his numerous books, 2, one is A Random Walk in Shantiniketan Ashrams, a collection of essays penned during his tenure as the Vice Chancellor. And he has just recently launched Visva Bharati 1921 to 2021, that is 100 years of Visva Bharati. It's titled, interestingly, A Vision Betrayed. So that's Professor Dattagupta, and that's, so here is Professor Dattagupta for you. And well, I think at this point of time, I should make an exit, and I leave it to Professor Dattagupta and Professor Das Gupta to talk about Sriniketan. I have personally got 2 issues which I would like to butt in little later. Time is short, so I will come in later, but please, I think if we can start the discussion while I take a back seat at this point of time.
Are the audience going to join us in the discussion, or it is just the 2 of us?
The audience can chat, come to the chat box. So should they be having any queries or anything, any comment they want to make, the chat box is open on Facebook, so they can chat through the Facebook, and we can. I will put up the chats as they come along. Right. Okay. So shall we start the discussion?
I think somehow the audibility is going down up and down.
I think it's probably an internet issue. No, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Now
okay, I can hear you.
Now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, fine. Now let's go. Let's go with it.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe Dr. Das Gupta should start.
Okay. Let me start by asking Professor Das Gupta the very basic question that I know you have been associated with Shantiniketan and Visva Bharati for a very long time, and you're a Tagore scholar and a Tagore biographer, and you have done many sort of books on Tagore. But what led you to do a book on Sriniketan? I mean, that's where I think we should start this discussion. Right. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Actually, before I did a book on Sriniketan, I obviously was doing years of research on the history of Shantiniketan and Sriniketan, starting in the middle of the 1970s. So we, my husband and me, with our little boy, who was then 5 months old, moved at that point of time from Oxford, where we were on fellowships, my husband and me. And once the fellowships were over, we were invited, my husband was invited by the then Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr Sushanta Dattagupta, a very eminent historian. My husband was invited by him, was actually invited by him from about 2 years ago, when my husband was teaching at Presidency, to come to Shantiniketan, to come to Visva Bharati. And as much I put it, ektukhani itihash bibhagta ঠিক করে দিন এসে আপনারা আসুন, আপনি আসুন, আমাদের বিশ্বভারতীর ইতিহাস বিভাগটা একটু ঠিকঠাক করে দিন. But then at that point of time, my husband was not too keen to take it up right then. He was teaching at Presidency College, and he was sort of just settling down. He had come from Cambridge a few years back, and so he didn't take it up. But once our son was born in Oxford, just to quickly cut a long story short, he said to me, I at that point of time was teaching in Jadavpur, and I was on leave from Jadavpur, and my husband was on leave from Presidency College. And he said, if you think it's a good idea, and if Master Moshe is still asking him to come, let us leave our Calcutta jobs behind and go to Shantiniketan and raise our little boy in that beautiful pastoral place. And I said, oh yes, that's a good idea, let's do that. And that's how we came to Shantiniketan in 1973, having finished our work temporarily, at least our fellowships, I meant, at Oxford, at the University of Oxford. And that's really when I was looking for postdoctoral work to do, because I'd done my DPhil just a while ago. And I think historians find it difficult to keep away from archives and keep away from research. It becomes obviously integral to life. I'm sure it's true of all the subjects, anyone who is in research, I think, would find it difficult to stay away from it. But certainly I know about ourselves that we were never really kind of completely detached from the archives. I once heard Ram Ghosh say something very, very similar about himself. Anyway, so then because our little boy was a child, we were keen not to be separated by my going and doing research, that is collecting research, documentation, because historians can't do without documentation, from anywhere far So the idea was that I would try to see if I could do something right there in Shantiniketan by way of research. And indeed, that was a great, I think, a great windfall, because I went to Rabindra Bhavan, not really knowing what there was, except knowing that the Tagore's literary manuscripts were mostly there. That was a great repository of Tagore's literary manuscripts. This, I think, we all knew. But that there was so much more, that there was so much else, is something that I didn't know we didn't know. And my husband often said that if one knew that this was such a great repository of letters by Rabindranath from all over the world, and of course by him, to everyone significant in his own country and abroad, that he would have put his students onto some research at Rabindra Bhavan. But unfortunately, Visva Bharati does keep itself rather exclusive. And this is why people don't get to know what a great archives there are. I don't think there is any other poet in the world, including, the greats, Shakespeare, Goethe, name at least the two, but one can name more. I don't think there is such an archives named and established, founded about the work of a poet, as is Rabindranath's work, encased in Visva Bharati at Rabindra Bhavan. And I say the word encased, which is truly factually so, but I also say the word encased, that it's really stayed in a case. But anyway, that certainly was great for me, because I started without knowing very much about the history of Shantiniketan, just something basic, because I had certainly a very strong connection with Shantiniketan and Sriniketan. As you may have seen, Sridhar Babu, I dedicated that book to my parents, who I've described truly as the pioneers of the Sriniketan work. My father was the first Dartington Fellow there, having studied and done his graduate work in agricultural science in Britain. And on his return, Rabindranath used to try and look for people like him. In other words, anyone who had done agricultural sciences abroad. As you know, he had sent his son as early as in 1906 to study agricultural science in the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So he used to look for such people, and he must have found out by some source that my father was just a recently returned agricultural scientist. So my father was invited to be there, and I wasn't born then. This was in 1936. So my parents, with my brother, who was 6 years older than me, as a little child, went to be at Sriniketan and Shantiniketan doing this work. So I had certainly very much a very strong consciousness about the history of that institution. And that certainly helped me to make the connection. But I started my own research at Rabindra Bhavan from that time onwards. And just by reading the letters, just by starting with the letters, and I found how much there was from Rabindranath about the institution. He was writing to so many people about his dreams for Shantiniketan, his dreams for Visva Bharati, and onward. I also came across letters as I kept reading them, just alphabetically almost, his disappointments as well.
I just wanted to bring in, there is a comment which has come from for Professor Das Gupta from Maitri Guho Purkayat, and she says that hearing you speak Umadi is an enriching experience to me and my daughter. And that's come from Maitri. Right. Okay.
Are you there, Mrs. Tanya?
No, I'm there. You can see me, I'm there.
Yes.
You can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
I keep coming in and going.
But I don't see Mr. Sanyal.
Oh.
Okay, you don't see me. Okay, but Sushanta, that doesn't matter. You carry on. Your voice is breaking a little. Your voice is breaking a little. I think it's an internet issue.
Can you see Mr. Sanyal?
Yes, I can see him well. I
Hello?
think I can see him well. I can see Mr. Shanal well. I think Professor Dr. Gupta, you're probably having problem with your internet connection, because
Yes, I think.
your face is a little blurred, which shows that you are having an internet connection problem.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's why you probably can't see.
Yeah.
Are you in Shantiniketan?
Maybe I should move to another room. Yeah, I'm in Shantiniketan, but I'm using a dual connector. Normally it works, but maybe I should move to another room then. Maybe.
Okay, you move to another room, Professor Dr. Gupta. Meanwhile, I'll ask Professor Das Gupta another question. Let me.
Maybe I should move to another corner. Let me try.
Yeah.
So please
maybe you do
have
that,
a little
and
patience with me. Just couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. No. Meanwhile, I will ask Professor Das Gupta this another question, which is there are a lot of there's a lot of document that you have mentioned in the book, extracts from speeches, but before we come to that, can we talk about Elmhurst and Tagore? Getting Elmhurst all the way from England to stay there, and then that association between Tagore and Elmhurst and Sriniketan.
Yes, indeed, I can. Thank you for the question. It's obviously an important question. You see, as I had mentioned already in the context of my father coming there as Dartington Fellow, Rabindranath was looking for people, especially trained in the agricultural sciences, but the other sciences as well, but especially agricultural sciences, for his Sriniketan work, for his village work, which started even before Sriniketan. And that's why in 1906, he sent his son's friend from the Shantiniketan school, who was also his friend's son, Shish Chandra Majumdar's son, Shanta Chandra Majumdar, and his son-in-law, his youngest son-in-law, Nagendranath Ganguly, who became a very renowned agricultural scientist. So he sent all three of them in 1906 and 1907. 1906 was Rothindranath, his son, and Shanta Chandra Majumdar. And 1907 was Nagendranath Ganguly. Now, why? Sriniketan hadn't started in 1906, but he was working on village reconstruction. He had started working on village reconstruction years before Sriniketan in the Tagore family's agricultural estates, where his father had sent him in the early 1890s to actually look after to manage the estates. That is how Maharishi used to do it. Once he became elderly, he was sending his sons, one after the other, starting with his eldest son, who was such a philosopher, such a completely out of this world person, that he couldn't do much. He couldn't face it. So, but he tried each of his sons one after the other. Shotindranath was out of the question, because Shotindranath was a member of the Indian Civil Service, and obviously couldn't come to stay in Shilaidaho and look after manage the estates, look after the estates. Jyotirindranath certainly went for a while, but Robindranath actually, strangely, but did a great job of looking after the family's agricultural estates. And that's when his village work started. That's when his work of rural reconstruction really started. And he continued it when he moved to Shantiniketan in 1901, after staying for a decade in Shilaidaho. And of course, Shilaidaho was the headquarters of the Jomidari. But then he was sailing in the Podda boat and going to the other estates, day in and day out. He loved it. He loved, of course, the environment, nature, which that allowed him being on the boat, being on the rivers. But he also loved to get to know the countryside. It was his very first exposure to village life, because till then he had only been in Jorashako House, confined almost to the city.
Okay.
Not almost confined to the city, but confined almost only to Jorashako House with those high walls. They were not even allowed to go out. So anyway, that is when his village reconstruction work started. He moved to Shantiniketan. He decided to continue the work. There was ample scope for that, because Shantiniketan, which was actually started, as you know, by Maharshi, it's really a long history. We shouldn't be surprised that it's 100 years old. Long history, but we hardly have noticed it. We have, as you said, Mr. Shanal, right at the beginning, that we've really noticed Shantiniketan as a lovely little place, as a great place to visit as a tourist and to admire it. But the history, the work that was done there is absolutely remarkable. And so he decided that he would continue the work of the villages in the villages surrounding the Shantiniketan school. There was ample scope for that. And his famous saying was, even if I can't do everything for the country, I can at least try to serve my village neighbors at the Shantiniketan school. So even if
wonderful.
Yes, so that is where his
Wonderful.
village reconstruction work started. Now, coming to Elmhurst, it is only 20 years later from the time that I just reached, which is 1901, when he moved to Shantiniketan from Shilaidaho and founded his Shantiniketan school and started his work there. 20 years later, he wanted, obviously, to formalize this work of rural reconstruction. And in 1912, he was slowly building up. His resources were minimal. He bought a land, 12 bigas. In 1912, he bought a land of, I think, 20 bigas, or maybe Professor Dr. Gupta will correct me on this.
And at that point, Umadi, I will just check if Professor Dr. Gupta, his system is working. If you can you hear us?
I think that I've moved to another corner, another room, and
we can hear you.
The internet works better.
Yeah, it's working. So you better get on to it now.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, can you hear me now, both of you?
No.
Can both of you hear me now?
Well, your voice is breaking very badly. Very badly. Yes, your voice is breaking. You clearly have an internet connection.
Yeah, there is an internet problem. But yes, your voice is breaking and you're freezing your.
বোঝা যাচ্ছে না প্রসিদ্ধ গুপ্ত কথাগুলো।
Umadi, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something in the meantime. There is an annexure, this one, this Bollopur. Right. Okay. Right. Now, this Bollopur Rural Survey, I've gone through it. This is by Kalimohan Ghosh himself, that you have attached as a part of the book.
Yes.
It's an amazing document. It's an amazing document, and I'm so surprised. And I, having come from an advertising and a marketing background, therefore researches have been something that we have, research figures and research document. But this seems to be as good as what it is now, what he had done then. That's number one. It's so precise and so well. The other point over here, which I wanted to ask you, is that I noticed from the audited balance sheet that they have given over here, there are two things. And I must say I'm being a little naughty about this. But on the income side, they say that income from the services of priests and preceptors, 244 rupees and charana. Of that, Dokhina, fee of the priest, is shown as an income of 179 rupees. And also, Toilabot, honorarium for religious direction from priest, Shetao, 8 rupees. So the income from the priest seems to have been a part of the revenue. On the other hand, on the expense side, I
Yeah.
find that after rice and vegetable, fish, oil, ghee, there is liquor, hemp, and hemp leaves, which is for which 2 rupee 14 annas and 9 paise have been spent. Now I was wondering what is this hemp normally means, gaja, something to that effect,
Yes, yes,
and
of course.
liquor.
Remember,
Yeah,
this is village India. This is village India. You have to remember that.
that's right. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
May
Shushantada,
I go back to
are you?
Elmhurst for a bit? Mr. Sriniketan Babu, may I go back to Elmhurst for a bit? You're
Yeah, yeah,
coming
yeah.
back
Let's go back to Elmhurst.
to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because that's
yeah.
how, and I'll do that in a minute or so. Just the
Sure,
basic thing.
sure,
That's
sure.
when Sriniketan was started. When Elmhurst came,
Right,
Rabindranath met Elmhurst as a young man. Mind you, Elmhurst was then a student of agricultural science at Cornell in
right,
1921 when Rabindranath was traveling all over the US and in Europe trying to
right.
spread the word about Visva Bharati. And he had come to know about Elmhurst from another agricultural scientist who was in India called Sam Higginbottom, right? Who started the Allahabad Institute of Agricultural Science. So
Okay, okay.
Rabindranath, as I told you, again, the same thing. He was always trying to look for people who were scientific agricultural scientists. In other words, had done scientific agricultural uh, science and dairy farming, poultry farming, etc. All of which were going to be done, carried out in Sriniketan. So he wrote to Elmhurst saying, "I believe you may like to come to India and work for my village reconstruction program. I uh, I am in a place where the villages surrounding us are in decline, and I want to really know how to actually stop this decline. I want to try and stop this decline with the help of scientists. Will you come and help me? I believe you would be interested because Elmhurst had gone as a war volunteer earlier, and that's what Sam Higginbottom told him, that here is this young man who is interested in India. He came as a war volunteer. But anyway, there's so much that one can be said, but obviously this is not the time for that. But so he asked Elmhurst to come and see him, which he did. In New York, they met, and he said, "Will you come with me to Shantiniketan to work for village reconstruction?" And Elmhurst said, "Yes, I will, but I must finish my degree at Cornell in order to be really useful to you. So may I go after a year? May I come after a year?" And he did. That was 1922. That was when Sriniketan was established. In fact, this is 100 years. 2022 is 100 years of Sriniketan, but 101 years of Vishwabharati. The Sriniketan came a
That's right.
year later.
Yes.
Sriniketan Institute
Yeah.
of Rural Reconstruction came a year later. But we must remember that his work for village reconstruction had started much earlier.
That's right.
And then you
Shushantada, I
can
think if you
go
can
on with
talk
your
now.
question. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
right.
your
So
internet must be
I
working.
would,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I would like to just add, because it's already a lot of it has been written in the book, and Dr. Dasgupta has already covered much of the important elements of the book. I think it's a timely reminder that after 100 years of Vishwabharati, that Sriniketan was an integral component of Vishabharati. As you said at the outset, as visitor to Shantiniketan and Vishabharati, you would normally see the Upasana Griha, Ravindra Bhavan, Sangit Bhavan, Kala Bhavan, and Pato Bhavan, and think that is Vishabharati. However, as it is explicitly discussed in the book, that Rabindranath Tagore, from 1920 onwards, and even earlier, he was so much interested in community bonding that he felt that unless the university impacts on the community, education is not very meaningful. And so, contrary to what people may think, Tagore, much of his efforts and focus were actually in Sriniketan from 1920 onwards, when he was also traveling. See, it's coincidental that after his Nobel Prize and then 15, 16 onwards, 17 onwards, Tagore was extensively traveling. And from 1920 onwards, he met many scientists like Romarola, only half scientists, and also Einstein. And then he had, as been discussed already, that he had sent his son and two other students of his who are very well-known people, Santosh Majumdar and Ganguly, in 1906, as early as that, to Illinois to study agriculture. So what I wanted to add is that, and this is something that has to be said over and over again, that Sriniketan was very central to Tagore's idea of Vishwabharati. It was not just Shantiniketan. And what the book also brings out, and here maybe we'll get into some critical areas, is that even during Tagore's time, the Shantiniketan people didn't quite accept Sriniketan. I mean, when Dr. Das Gupta discusses the importance of local crafts, and Tagore wanted, and Nandalal Bose also joined hands with him, that the Kala Bhavan in Sriniketan should actually work together with Sriniketan people to enhance the capability of local people in craftsmanship, which Tagore actually, with the help of his son Rothindranath Tagore, made it into also a commercial venture that the people there could get some employment out of that. But somehow the Kalavavan people were not too excited about it. So as you know, the whole thing about the rural reconstruction project, even the school called Shiksha Shatra, they were all started in Shantiniketan, but they had to be eventually moved to Sriniketan, which has been discussed in the book. So now if you understand Sriniketan in the proper context, that this was not a regular run-of-the-mill university in India, which most of them were built in the British model since the Macaulay days. Tagore wanted to have another system of education which is based on our values imbibed in Upanishad, Vedic, Buddhist, Islamic culture. And so, therefore, community and the village life, which is here, it was in resonance with Gandhi, that they felt that India lives in its villages. And so, therefore, the whole experiment in Shurul and nearby areas were motivated by this desire that this would not be a standard university imparting Western education to the students. The students must imbibe what's happening locally, and there are so many things to learn in herbal medicine, in nature, how to preserve nature, and in today's context of climate change issues, environmental issues. I think Tagore's project in Sriniketan is as a case in point, is a model to follow. Fortunately, 100 years later, or even the education ministry is now saying that every university should have a community college or something like that. But this is something that Tagore thought about more than 100 years ago. So the book is actually a treasure house for people to know that what Sriniketan was all about. And in fact, as Dr. Das Gupta has mentioned in our book, that Tagore was also interested in malaria eradication in rural area, and so Gretchen Green was helping him in this project of malaria patients, and as the book says, that much more than educating the people, he wanted the villagers to have joy, to have confidence in themselves. So these are the various things that I think are not very well known, and so therefore I said that the book is a very timely document, especially in the centenary year of Vishwabharati. There are many other points that I may want to ask Dr. Das Gupta later, a few questions, but maybe you continue, Sujit Babu.
Okay, no, before I continue, I mean, it is better you all
Was
continue.
I audible now?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
somewhat
Was I audible now?
but it's okay.
Better.
Yeah,
It's better
it's
now.
okay.
It's better now.
It's better,
Not
better,
perfect, but it's
better.
better.
Okay, there is another comment that has come from Maitri. You can read the comment. It says that you are presenting the real story as an artwork, and I think that is for Umadi over here. There is one comment I want to make in general about the book over here. Is that going through the whole book, what struck me is that the blueprint for development of India was here in his views and his philosophy and his thinkings on Sriniketan. Like Professor Dr Gupta was saying, from malaria to handicraft to the entire, today we have all kinds of, branded political things like Manregas and rural ye and so on and so forth. But this was all there in between 1921. It was all there. And that is why I think Professor Dasgupta's book has, brought this whole thing up. Suddenly I've woken up. Also, the fact that he was really the landless and, literally the landless and the peasants. He was the most benevolent zamindar. Though there were people at times used to say that he's a feudal lord and he's this and he's that. Oh my God, this book has completely changed if anybody had any perception that Tagore was a jomidar. But this is the way he had his views, and I think there are extracts in the book which will take it on. Can we do one thing? Can we take a look at some pictures on Sriniketan which is there in the book, and maybe we could then continue our discussion accordingly. So I will just move to look at some pictures that we have. Okay, this is a picture which is the Sriniketan landscape, and it's absolutely rural and pastoral with those tal gaches standing at the back. Very, very Sriniketan, very Shantiniketan. I'll come back to this picture later. This is, as you can see, agriculture work happening in Sriniketan. This I don't know how old is this picture, but it's black and white, so I presume it must be old. And
oh yes, these pictures are old.
Pictures are old, yes, and yes. There are a lot of young people also working on the fields. That's interesting. And this is Amherst and Tagore. This must have been around in the 20s. 30s, yes. Around that point of time. Yes. Why I skipped that picture, I'll tell you. I have a question there. This is, of course, Jawaharlal Nehru. And yes. One very interesting thing is that he's visiting Sriniketan. And if you see the Bengali gentlemen, all academics or people concerned with Shantiniketan at that point of time, and very rarely nowadays you don't get to see people, the Bengali gentry wearing dhoti kurta with a shawl, as you can see in this picture. That's completely. So these are some of this must have been post-independence. So I presume this must have been in the early 50s when he must have come to pay a visit as the Acharya. But now this picture, this is actually the cheap kuti. Now two questions over here on this cheap kuti. Let me return to the fold, and that will make it a little easier for me. Why I wanted to bring this up was. I think since we may be having a lot of non-Bengali audience over here, to explain what is kuti, because kuti is something that we understand in Bengal and both sides of the Bengal, because I think to put it simply, they were probably the outpost for the indigo plantation. I think that's where that kuti word is. I don't know, you all can suggest a better word for it. And secondly, why was it cheap? I mean, I know there was a gentleman called Cheap, but how?
One Cheap. George Cheap was his name.
George Cheap.
He was East India Company's agent.
All right. Okay. Now there is another query over here. A historian friend of mine had once mentioned to me that he was doing some studying on the French and British wars, in the early years. And apparently there was the war even came right up to borders of Bolpur. I mean, almost in Shantiniketan, which I didn't buy that. I said that they must have been fighting in in France, the 100 Years' War and all that. And here they came and occupied Chandannagar, the Dutch occupied Srirampur, the British occupied Kolkata, and I think the story was over. But he said, nah, there was a kind of a thing, and there was apparently again an indigo kuti kind of thing. This has all been very. So I thought I'll just mention this one to take up that kuti. And who is George Cheap? And there is a mention in your book, Professor Dasgupta, about the Sinhas having also a. Now, these I suppose are the So I thought I'll just put this up to clear my.
Okay, we start with John Cheap. John Cheap was an East India Company's agent, and you're right about indigo plantations being one of the chief, features of the trade at that point of time. But
Right.
John Cheap wasn't into indigo plantation. Yes, Birbhum had a great reputation for their weaving, for the weaving in that area. And John Cheap was an East India Company's agent who was actually established there, who was a very successful man. He had a large mansion house. It was a Palladian house.
1787.
Yes. And
1787, right?
Yes. Late 18th century, yes. And you see, the cloth used to be coming from Manchester and woven into designs in Birbhum and shipped back. And this was where the John Cheap's work was very successful as the East India Company's agent. So his work or his stay was not related to indigo. But you're right about indigo plantation being one of the most important, as we all know, aspects of the economic history of that time. So that's John Cheap. Now, about kuti. See, kuti, and Professor Dattagupta, kindly feel free to join me in this. See, kuti is cottage as we understand it in the common parlance, right? Kuti. But kuti also refers to office. For example, the Jomidari office in Purba Bangla, which Rabindranath was serving, we talked about this, had a kuti bari there too. And that was their office in Kushtia. Kushtia was the town because Kushtia was connected by railways. So in fact, that is how Rabindranath used to travel to those parts. Right. And their office was called the kuti there. And in fact, I've been to Kushtia. That building still exists. And indeed, there is a plaque there, an old plaque. So kuti is a kind of perhaps a multi-dimensional word. কারণ আমরা তো গ্রাম বাংলায় গেলে আমরা তো কুঠি বলি অনেক সময় বাড়িগুলো দেখে, like a hut. So kuti has some other connotation.
Okay.
Well,
okay. And that Professor Dasgupta. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. No, I told completely in resonance with what Dr. Dasgupta said about kuti. The only maybe question I had was that it looks like historically John Cheap lived there in Birbhum as resident of the East India Company from 1787 to 1828. And what I also know, and I'm sure Dr. Dasgupta knows, that there is a huge kind of mansion in the outskirts campus of Visva Bharati, now in the forest department, behind the present social work department, which is known as Cheap Kuti. And so I was wondering that where did John Cheap live? Did he live in the Cheap Kuti that we know, which is in the ruins now between 1787 and 1828? Or did he live in what is known as now Kuti Bari since 1912, when Tagore acquired it from the Sinhas of Raipur, and before that the Sinhas bought the land from the Sarkars of Surul. So, I mean, John Cheap actually married a local woman, and he was deeply there. And so, you can see the house in ruins, which is also called Cheap Kuti. So I was wondering, where did he actually live? Where was the office of John Cheap? Was it in the present Kutibadi, or is in the ruins, which is what we know as Cheap Kuti?
In the ruins. It was a Palladian building. There is actually a small but quite well-researched pamphlet on John Cheap called John Cheap of Shurul, written by somebody you may have heard of by name. I had actually also met him, Nipendranath Bhattacharjee. Nipendranath Bhattacharjee. It's there. I mean, if you inquire at Ravindra Bhavan, you should be able to get it. I certainly have a copy. It was published by Vishwabharati Quarterly as a supplement. John Cheap of Shurul, the title. Now, that is where John Cheap lived. In fact, there's wonderful description of how he made the surroundings of his house into a very, very rich orchard. And once he left, everything fell into ruin. And it was part of the land that Rabindranath bought from Shatendra Prasanna Singha. And that's really the house.
So, Sanya, the Kuti Bari that Tagore had in 1912 actually is central to this Sriniketan project, as Dr. Das Gupta has pointed out in the book, that it is there. Elmhurst in 1922 had the first kind of initiation of the rural reconstruction project of Sriniketan. So the Kuti Bari that we know of, which is standing as a very gorgeous building in Sriniketan, next to which the Holocaustion Utsav is held, and there are beautiful murals there by Nandalal Bose and others. So, I mean, as I said earlier, and Uma Das Gupta says it in the book, that it is Nandalal Bosu who could be persuaded by Tagore to do a lot of work in Sriniketan. And so Kuti Bari, therefore, you may say Kuti Bari 1912 is the beginning of Sriniketan. And it's quite interesting also, I may add, that a lot of things like, for instance, everybody talks about Patavavon, but Patavavon formally got started only in 1925. Shikha Shatru preceded Patavavon in 1922 and then later on in 1924. So again, I'm trying to bring to the fore the importance that Tagore put on Sriniketan. Let me also ask now Dr. Das Gupta another thing, that as I was saying earlier, that you think of the chronology, 1922, 1921, 22, Elmhurst comes, and then Tagore is on his various jaunts abroad, and then he meets Einstein in 1926, then in 1930 again 3 times, and in between he goes to Russia, he writes Russia Chithi, and the Russia Chithi is full of mechanized farming, cooperative farming, all that were built into the Sriniketan project. The question I have to Dr. Das Gupta, since she has also worked at the Indian Statistical Institute, and as she correctly said, Tagore had a scientific bent of mind. He wanted to apply scientific ideas to agriculture and farming. And Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis was his secretary, who was the founder of the Indian Statistical Institute. And so my question is, Das Gupta, why is Mahalanobis not mentioned in the book? Was there some disagreement between Tagore and Mahalanobis in the way Sriniketan project was executed?
Okay, no, not really. I mean, there's no. Prashanta Chandra Mahalanobis was one of Rabindranath's closest people.
So he was also secretary. Yeah.
call him, but that's only that's really
I
hardly
know,
significant.
that's a nomenclature, but he was very
You read
close.
the letters
In
between them.
fact, since you know the ISI campus on BT Road in Calcutta, Mahalanobis also had a mini Sriniketan inside the campus with with cattle and all
Amrapali.
kinds of things. Yeah,
No,
Amrapali,
no, no,
etc.
I
Right.
didn't. It's not that I didn't mention him because there was a disagreements are disagreements can always happen between even the closest people. I didn't go into too many personalities because then I
No,
would not
but you
have been
also
able
said,
to.
I mean, if I may ask you, you also said that Tagore didn't. I mean, he wanted statistics, but he didn't want statistics to overwhelm the project. He wanted people to enjoy farming, enjoy and derive a lot of delight from what they were doing. And maybe he wanted to underplay the scientific content of statistics. This is my guess.
Oh no no! Oh no no no! Honestly, not. If that was there, that's something I'm certainly not aware of. It has nothing to do specifically with statistics. He was very interested, Professor Dr. Gupta, Rabindranath, in bringing the sciences to the villages because he knew there was no other way that he could really uplift the villages. And there are innumerable, beautiful excerpts from his writings that you will find in this book. I mean, just a few that I used. It is only if we have science that we can live and we can learn to live in the future modern age. So
Right.
no, I
I
really don't
agree with
think
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think it had anything to do with. We talked about malaria a few minutes ago. Now, why
Right.
malaria? Because that was why the villages were declining. The villages
Yes.
were dying because people were absolutely infested with malaria. In fact, the Sriniketan work couldn't start from 1912 when it was ready to start because the land was there, Rothindranath was there, Nagendranath Ganguly had come back with all their state of the art knowledge. But because every time they started, and this happened two or three times, certainly two times, also a third time, they just came down with malaria and the work had to stop. So he had this great malariologist come over with the help of funding from the Quakers, from the US, American Quakers, called Harry Timbers, who lived there for 3 years and then went to Russia and indeed, very sadly, died in Russia, also from malaria related illness. But anyway, the point being that why malaria? Because this was the only way, it's only by preventing malaria, learning to live with malaria by methods of prevention, scientific methods of prevention, grassroots methods of prevention, that, you know, the villages could survive. So it was entirely to really ensure that the villages don't decline anymore. Certainly, what you're saying about joy, cheerful life, music, jatras, all this is very correct. That he wanted those as much, and he indeed tried, throughout to bring that about. Have a clubhouse almost in modern terms where they could meet and have sessions on readings from the Mahabharatas, readings from the folk tales and songs and singing. So yes, joy, because he also said, there is no life that I know as cheerless as our as the life in our villages. It's there in the book, so it's there with the
Right. Right.
documentation, with the back
Right. Right.
supporting.
Now,
Uh,
now Sujit Babu,
you're
Sujit
right about
Babu,
that.
yeah,
Basically, science and self-reliance. These two, I think,
Right.
were the main
Right.
issues behind
yeah.
this.
Sujit Babu,
Yes.
a
Hmm.
unique thing in Visva Bharati, which is also discussed in the book, are institutionalized events. Tagore called them utsavs, and uh, they actually were also part of education because he saw even the manifestation of science to nature, and so therefore these utsavs brought out people's uh, connection and connectivity with nature, environment, etc.
Right.
And these utsavs are like, a Vriksharopon, tree planting, which after Tagore's death is done on 22 Shravan, which is his date of passing. Rothindranath initiated it, but Tagore had tree plantation, Vriksharopon, even during his time, and also Holocaust. And then another event which I think is very interesting is called Shilpotsav. I mean, he not only thought about trees to be planted, and then the land has to be plowed also, this Holocaust, and then you also have to have industrialization and technology, so you have to do mining and go down, and therefore he encouraged the Shiksha Shatra students and others in rural reconstruction project to in fact imbibe things like carpentry, masonry, also a lot of implements for farming, etc. Now, interestingly, I just want to ask Uma Das Gupta that there's a section on Utsav, and what I mentioned are the Magh Utsavs, which is the Magh Mela, which is in fact sometimes called the foundation day of Sriniketan, and also Holocaust, the ploughing. But Shilpotsav and Vriksharopon are mentioned separately, not under the festivals there. So, is this does this also indicate a kind of a divide between Shantiniketan and Sriniketan? Well, Vriksharopon is held in Shantiniketan, Holocaust is held in Sriniketan, and so is Shilpotsav. So, and I have experienced it that people in Shantiniketan do not even go to watch Holocaust and Shilpotsav. So, this divide is something that Dr. Dasgupta has pointed out, but this is something that people should understand that it persists even stronger today. And therefore, I again bring this to the say that this why this book is so important is that if Sriniketan is allowed to decay, then so will be Bharati.
I think that's a very, very important point that you have made. And well, we are exactly 4 minutes past our time, and I have promised to Umadi that it will be at 9 o'clock that I will clock. But I want to tell something to to our audience over here. First of all, I want you all to give me a lot of good marks for being an excellent student. If you see that if I'm shining because of them from both sides. This has been an extremely engrossing discussion, and I really wish we could carry on this adda for, because there's so much to learn. This is not a this is a, we are calling it a author's chat, but there is so much to learn. There is so much and one is a Tagore authority, the other is a former vice chancellor of Visva Bharati. It can't get better. These kind of discussions can't get better. And Professor Dr. Gupta, I am also waiting to take you on your book on vision denied. That we are planning to talk on. I think, in fact, we are planning to do it. In fact, on Pochishe Boishak. I mean, that's where I think it will make a lot more relevant. And Yogi books.
Professor Partha Ghosh will do the role that I am playing.
Yes. Yeah. So again, I will be managing the backlighting, and in case there is any butting in it between to keep the movement going. And a big thank you to Yogi Books for having taken on and published this book. My only thing is that this vision within the covers of this book, the total vision of India, not just of Tagore, is all there, and so much really. And I only hope that all of us who only go to Shantiniketan will next time also make a trip to Sriniketan. That's a must. And one more person I need to thank is my adopted sibling, Srinanda, who runs Indira Goshti, because every time I have an issue with that, I call her up and said that, and a naam deto, and then she says, okay, ki, I will who can take on Uma Das Gupta. So she said, একজন ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর হবে? I said, বাবা এরকম ভাবে হয় নাকি? So that's how with a lot of fear I had gone through, and then here we are here in one big adda, which I hope would have continued longer. I am sure my audience over here would have continued longer, but we have to close it over here.
On my part, I should like to thank Kahani Kancherti and also Sujit Sanyal and also Niyogi Books for letting me participate in this very important discussion, especially Ms. Upadhyaya. And so thank you very much for a very enjoyable evening. And I'm sorry about the internet vagaries. I had no control over it. Yeah.
See, yeah, I understand. Now you're sounding.
You can imagine how Tagore suffered in Shantiniketan in the heat and also as Uma Das Gupta points out, the plow that was used and Elmas saw that plow and he said the plow was only making scratches on the ground and nothing more than that. That was the level of technology.
Excellent. Umadi, thank you very much. And I only hope in other sessions we will continue this, be enriched with your knowledge on Tagore. This book has, personally for me, this book has changed my perspective about life in many ways, about the country in many ways. And we are really blessed today. That's what Archana Upadhyaya is saying, that we are really truly blessed to have you all, both of us here with us today to discuss this book. Sushanta Da, I think I better stick to calling you Sushanta Da because otherwise Dasgupta and Dr. Gupta gets mixed up. So, I hope that permission is granted. Umadi is Umadi, you are Sushanta Da, and that's how we'll take it. And for the others, please keep following us on our website. Please go to our social media page on Facebook. And we are having a lot of more programs lined up, which includes the street theater, Safdar Hashmi, a book on Kashmir, which is very relevant at this point of time, and a lot of programs on music and Somnath Hor. So, well, there you are. So please keep in touch with Kahani Kancherti, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Umadi. Thank you, Sushanta Da, and thank the audience. Thank Archana. Thank you, Niyogi Books.
Thank you very
so with
much.
that, we close today. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Thank
Dattagupta.
Thank you.